How much are we willing to let go of the wheel when it comes to our financial lives? There are steps that are already being taken beyond just pure robo advisory for AI to try and work out what is the next best action that we should be taking. And are we willing to let the AI just refinance our loans for us?
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Smarter Money Show. My name is Vlad Sherbetov. We have another special guest today. He's a fintech executive who represents the Financial Services Global Industry Development Division of NVIDIA. NVIDIA, of course, is a massive multinational technology and artificial intelligence company that's been around for almost 30 years. Please welcome Kevin Levitt.
Hi, Vlad. Great to be here.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to start by remembering something, a quick story. Okay, in 1998, an epic video game was released, a game that would become a classic, and it was called Rainbow Six. Do you remember this game? Do you know what I'm talking about?
You've got me beat. I was on Nintendo, but keep rolling. I like it.
Well, it was a personal shooter. It was really hot. It was using the latest graphics. I desperately wanted to play it. I was about 12 years old at the time, and I really wanted to play it on my PC computer. But unfortunately, I couldn't. And it's not because I couldn't have the game. And in fact, I got the game shortly after it was released. But the reason I couldn't play it is that I was missing something else. My computer wasn't powerful enough to play this game. So I spent the next few months trying to save money, do some chores, got a little bit from my older brother who was 18. He was just as excited to play it. And we went to a local computer store to find the NVIDIA GeForce, I believe it was called, graphics
GeForce
video card.
Mm-hmm.
We came home, we opened up our computer. Of course, we were doing all our own computer upgrades. We stuck that thing in and we played that game. And at least for that stage of my life, a dream came true. I want to hear it from you. NVIDIA is a massive company. You have so many industries that you cover, and you have so many products and services within those industries. So I'd love to hear from you. How do you describe NVIDIA and its purpose?
Sure. I love that story. And you're not alone. And I would say that story persists today for 12-year-olds all over the world. As you know, obviously accelerated computing and graphics and gaming is core to who we are today at NVIDIA. I would say what people don't really understand or recognize about NVIDIA is the role that the graphics processing unit, the GPU that you went out and bought, plays in artificial intelligence today. And so today we have truly evolved into an accelerated computing platform company that operates at not just the gaming console scale, but at data center scale. And this is really important, I think, for all of your listeners, whether they're consumers or financial services professionals, to understand the role that AI is going to play in all of our lives from a financial services standpoint. And the only way to take advantage of all the tremendous modeling techniques and capabilities and data that's out there is to utilize an accelerated computing platform like NVIDIA's. And we can get into more details in terms of what that entails, but at our heart, we are all about enabling innovation on top of our accelerated computing platform.
So were you always interested in AI? How did you find yourself with this company?
Sure. Appreciate the question. I've spent really the last 15 plus years at the intersection of data, technology, and financial services. But I'll be honest, I'm not a gamer at heart. And so when the recruiter called me while I was still at a fintech startup, I'd frankly never heard of NVIDIA. And I think that's part of the opportunity that I saw, which is as you get to know the company and understand the hundreds, if not thousands of applications that ultimately just in financial services alone will be AI enabled. We're just at the beginning stages of seeing the opportunity materialize in AI enabled applications that are in production today across fintechs to the largest banks in the world. And as I got to know the company, one of my hesitations was I had spent those 15 years always at startups. I'd never worked for a company with more than 1,000 people, and to go to a company at the time that had 14, 15,000 employees was a bit intimidating, frankly. But as you get to know the people, the culture, and now that I've experienced it from the inside, it's one of the more dynamic kind of corporate cultures I think anybody can experience, because it is all about innovation. It's all about mission being the boss. It's all about enabling developers and the innovators of our time to do the best work. And it sounds a bit hyperbolic to say those types of things, but really it's who we are at the core, is to develop this accelerated computing platform, which has the chips and systems that we're known for. You mentioned the GPU at the beginning of the story. Everybody understands that we have all this great hardware, but the hardware is nothing unless there's great software, games, and in this case, deep learning models to run on top of the hardware. And so we've got a platform software layer that sits on top of the chips and systems that are really oriented to the developers across financial services to enable them to take advantage of this tremendous hardware and networking capabilities that we bring to bear. And then at the uppermost level, the third layer of our stack, are the application frameworks. And so these are really driven towards the line of business owners, the product managers, the CXOs that are trying to deliver virtual assistants and chatbots. Well, we have Riva, an application framework that will enable you to do that on top of our accelerated computing platform. They're all about making personalized recommendations. Well, we have Merlin, another application framework that will jumpstart your capability and opportunity to leverage the accelerated computing platform to deliver a truly personalized experience when it comes to financial services, when it comes to retail or any of the industries. And so I really found myself kind of at the beginning of this amazing curve. And I love working for companies where it's hard to stay at that learning curve. You're just fighting to catch up, and the continued innovation that I've experienced just in the past 2 years at NVIDIA shows that there's so much more opportunity that we're going to be capturing and enabling. I'm really excited.
But it sounds like the type of innovation that's happening at a level of a company such as NVIDIA is at that higher scale, and it's, as a professional, you must enjoy coming along for the ride and being part of that learning process. I mean, you're learning from some of the brightest, sources available out there. So I want to really dive into AI and finance.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned AI-enabled application. What is that? Is that what you were describing when you mentioned Reva and Merlin, or what is that exactly, AI-enabled applications?
Sure. Great question. I think you could use any use case as an example. So let's use a virtual assistant, a chatbot, if you will, on a mobile application, so that you have a question, you want to go to your bank, and just rather than call, you want to use the mobile app to get an answer to that question. You might use the chatbot feature available on that mobile app. If that mobile app is not, and that chatbot is not AI enabled, the experience is going to be subpar. You're not going to have the sophistication in the ability to answer any number of questions available through the app unless it's really AI enabled using deep learning and huge language models like BERT to really understand the context of the question and provide the right answer to the consumer. And if you're not AI enabled, you're also going to be delivering not just the wrong answer potentially, but you're going to do it in a timeline that seems awkward. We're talking here in real time. We would expect the same from a virtual assistant or chatbot. And if you're not GPU accelerated computing platform enabled at that point of inference, at that point of real-time interaction, you're going to have a negative experience ultimately for the consumer, and they're going to abandon the app, and they're going to find somebody that is AI enabled and can answer their question and can do it in the context where they want that interaction to take place. So that's just one example of AI enabled applications where you're really using an accelerated computing platform in conjunction with the more advanced deep learning modeling techniques to deliver a superior experience.
And how does that AI enablement actually happen? Does the technology that NVIDIA create crawl through, let's say, databases on the websites within all the content in there so that that chatbot can come up with the right answer? How does the chatbot know what to answer?
It's all driven by training, in model training, and that's all predicated on access to data. And so, yes, NVIDIA's accelerated computing platform helps all the way from the data extraction and preparation all the way through to the training of the model, and then ultimately at the point of inference as well. So we support all three major steps in that workflow, if you will. And it's really up to the banks, the insurance carriers, the asset managers, et cetera, to bring the data to bear so that the models can take advantage of all this plethora of interactions that have happened historically to really understand the business, train the model to understand when somebody asks about, when is my payment due, they understand, what that actually means. So there's so much opportunity because there's so much data available, and that data is growing exponentially. And the only way to truly handle that data is you have to use an accelerated computing platform to make the best AI-enabled application available.
Mm-hmm. And in the financial sector in particular, the type of data that is frequently at play is financial banking, connectivity, and transactional records. It could be credit histories pulled and pulled in. It could be past transactional histories, or let's say management of an account. So there's a lot of tools right now that are connecting to each other through APIs to pull this information and make it available. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there is still a challenge of properly interpreting all this data and making it truly useful and actionable in a way that makes a smooth customer experience in whatever the customer wants to achieve. Am I on the right track here? And does AI solve, or is the intention for AI to kind of help address this problem?
Sure. I think what you're alluding to is, the concept of open banking and the ability through API connections to be able to share your financial data as a consumer with any entity that you trust. And as those entities begin to accumulate all this information about you, how do they actually leverage it on your behalf? And how do they interpret and understand you? And that's where AI plays a huge role. There are, as we were talking about earlier, recommendation systems, and our application framework happens to be called Merlin, to enable the ability to take in all of this data and then help the financial institution make the right recommendation. And that recommendation isn't always about driving revenue and cross-selling products. That recommendation could be, oh, we see, in the case of me having moved to a new home, you've recently relocated. Here's some information that you should be reading to understand about your homeowner's insurance and how to select the right policy. And oh, we see that, you're about to have a child. And so where can the bank best interact and help the consumer along their life journey? And certainly that's in the context of financial services. And there's so much data out there that's available to understand who we are as consumers. The AI has the best opportunity to make sense of all that. And really, as you're making a more personalized recommendation, delivering a more personalized experience, that's where you're delivering a superior customer service interaction. And that's when you, as a bank or an insurance carrier, a brokerage, et cetera, are driving great customer lifetime value because you're retaining that customer longer, given the superior experience that they're being delivered.
So it sounds incredible. Is everybody doing this? Is anybody doing this? And why isn't everybody doing it?
I love the question, and a lot are doing it. Our financial services practice has been at NVIDIA since 2006. And so we have a long storied history working with the smallest fintech startups all the way through the biggest banks in the world. Everybody is at a different stage in kind of their AI journey, if you will, right? There are some banks that have already done the pilots and the proofs of concept, and they are in production with multiple AI enabled applications. And they're just trying to get the next one out the door. Whereas others are just seeing kind of the innovation that's happening across the competitive ecosystem and landscape, and they're trying to catch up. Mm-hmm. And no matter kind of where you are in this journey, what we're seeing is that the banks are at this point, as well as, insurance companies, et cetera, that they're trying to build a true AI enterprise strategy. And so where we find ourselves engaged most frequently today is working with the CXOs across the big banks, across the fintechs, to really help illuminate kind of where is the opportunity in terms of specific use cases that they want to AI enable, and then how do they build the infrastructure, the capability to deliver on that opportunity at scale. Because this is not going to stop in terms of the number and types of use cases that can be addressed through AI. The challenge that everybody's facing, this goes back to your question, is why isn't everybody doing it? Well, certainly setting up infrastructure can be complex when it comes to AI. It's challenging to make it both productive and scalable at the same time. And everybody has, total cost of ownership or ROI that they need to be able to achieve. And that's where, we really come in as educators and enablers around AI. What is interesting about NVIDIA is that you're never going to write a check to NVIDIA, very rarely. You ultimately are going to, adopt our accelerated computing platform on the cloud with an AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle, etc. Or you're going to go directly to your OEM like a HP or Dell or et cetera and acquire the servers that are necessary to build the infrastructure to enable enterprise AI. Where we come in is we're at the beginning and middle stages of that kind of exploration where you want to understand what do I need to be building in terms of AI infrastructure and what are the use cases I should be solving for and how should I think about that? So this is putting us in a great opportunity and position where we're kind of Switzerland. We just want you to have the best solution delivered to market as quickly as possible and to work with your data scientists and developers and leadership around how to build the right strategy and execute against it.
I love what you said about that you can support both the smaller fintechs and some of the largest banks, because of course, the way that they approach business is very different. They have very different budgets, they have very different objectives and resources. So my question is, when it does come to a smaller startup or a newer company that wants to be on the cutting edge of technology, but is obviously at an earlier phase from their business development and growth point of view, is it feasible? And what are some of the common use cases for those types of companies as opposed to use cases for massive organizations that are thinking enterprise and large scale?
We have a lot of examples where, fintechs and startups are leveraging AI across kind of the customer journey in particular. So a great example would be NerdWallet, right? We're familiar with NerdWallet, great fintech, all about recommendations. And it's really the beginning stages of the consumer journey where I need a home loan. I'm going to buy a new home. What's the right loan for me? I can go to a platform like NerdWallet and utilize their technology to get a recommendation. And their recommendation engine is powered by NVIDIA's accelerated computing platform so that you can produce the most actionable and relevant recommendation near instantaneously. And then once you've done that discovery as a consumer, of course, you're going to apply for the product. And so when you apply, it would be ideal if you're just not a single credit score. You talked about, credit score, credit risk, and, can a company utilize more than just the traditional bureau data to evaluate my ability to pay back a loan and therefore approve me for the financial product I need to enable my best life? And so that's where Upstart is a great example. They're now publicly traded, have been working with us for a while, and they're using AI at the point of underwriting to utilize more than just a credit score and credit report. And this enables them to approve more borrowers lower down in the credit spectrum and to do it at an average lower APR of, I think, around 16%. So it's a great financial enablement and empowerment story that Upstart is creating at the point of underwriting by using AI. And of course, we talked about customer service in terms of, companies using for chatbots and virtual assistants. I would say the other place where we're seeing a lot of adoption and utilization of AI, and it's among startups as well as the big banks, is in fraud detection. And there's so much financial crime out there. There are two major types. There's kind of identity fraud and transaction fraud. And from an identity perspective, being able to use, biometrics such as our voice when we call a call center. I know when Wells Fargo picks up, they're now, my voice is my password is what I have to say, and then I'm authenticated in. And there are technologies to understand, is that really Kevin or is it somebody perpetrating to be Kevin to try to get access to the account? And the same thing from a transaction fraud standpoint, where startups up through, the likes of American Express are using deep learning now to get ahead of the fraudsters from a transaction fraud standpoint to reduce false positives so that our experience, either as a merchant owner or as a consumer, isn't interrupted by getting flagged for fraud when it isn't, as well as just being more accurate. So there are all these great use cases point in time. And again, it's not just the biggest banks. There are plenty of fintechs and startups that are taking advantage of AI to enable an enhanced customer experience.
That's incredible. And it's easy to get excited when you listen to this because as a business owner, you want these things, right? You want to make your process more efficient. You want there to be custom recommendations. You want to better understand customer data and just create a better customer experience. I think what some people will be wondering about is, can I afford this? Like, how much does this stuff cost? And I understand that there's probably a wide spectrum of things you could be doing and type of initiatives you could be undertaking. But if you could explain it on a high level for somebody to wrap their head around costing of AI.
Sure. To your point, it's hard to put a number on it, given you can start wherever you're comfortable. And so it can be tens of thousands to obviously tens of millions, depending on the scope and scale. But what I would say is, there are certainly opportunities to work on pilots and POCs that can be utilized as a proof point to understand what does accelerated computing mean to your business. And it's not just the dollars and cents from an accounting standpoint. It's taking advantage of some of your most valuable resources, such as your data scientists. Because if they're sitting around for a week while a language model is training and focused on getting coffee and not iterating on that model time and again, day in, day out, because they don't have access to an accelerated computing platform, how well are you really taking advantage of this huge investment you've made in this great data science organization? The answer is you're not, unless they've got the best tools to do their best work. And that's where our accelerated computing platform comes in. So I'm sorry I don't have it costs $3.2 million to do the first project for you. Yeah. And it doesn't, in reality. And frankly, for startups, we've got a great program called Inception where we've got programs in place with some of the biggest CSPs in the world to deliver free credits. So you can get access to instances to do the proof points to really evolve from that startup stage. And so we really kind of focus again on that education enablement and really working with the developers. Our KPIs for, how we work in an ecosystem, whether that's in financial services or retail, manufacturing, et cetera, it's not revenues. It is actually things like workshops and developers trained and SDKs downloaded. And, how well are we doing at helping the industry advance in its utilization of AI so that not just the business fundamentals are stronger, but the customer experiences are better.
And where do you think is this headed? What is the future of AI and AI utilization, and specifically within the financial services? It sounds like there's already some amazing use cases out there. But if you were to look at where you're headed or where you're trying to take the financial industry, as you said, you're a big part of moving it forward. What is on the horizon for AI in the financial sector?
The parallel I draw is, kind of coming out of the financial crisis of 08, 09, the competition amongst banks and fintechs was really around consumer trust and brand loyalty and brand affinity, because so much had been eroded amongst the big banks, and the fintechs swooped in and took advantage of that and focused on a singular product or solution or service and delivered it to the hilt in terms of a great customer experience and gained market share. And I think the landscape now is shifting from a competition around brand trust and brand affinity and customer loyalty to more around AI, frankly, because the competitive landscape has shifted. It's not just fintechs and the incumbent big banks or insurance carriers versus insurtechs. You've also got big tech that's massively involved in payments and other segments. I'm talking about like Apple Pay and Amazon and Google, et cetera. So you've got big tech that's very interested in customers and their financial data. And then you've got big retail like Walmart, who has announced they're building a fintech in partnership with one of the best known fintech VCs in the land and river capital. So you've got all these different huge players going after this opportunity. And we believe that you're going to differentiate and earn market share through AI. Because if a competitor is using AI for customer service and you're not, your experience is going to be subpar relative to the competition. Same thing if from an underwriting perspective, if you're not like Upstart and taking alternative data into your underwriting practices and not able to see who really are the true credit-worthy applicants beyond a credit score, you're going to be acquiring less valuable customers than the competition. Same thing in terms of your back office processes. If you're not using AI, RPA, robotic process automation, to handle the back office automation of your enterprise and removing those inefficiencies from a cost standpoint, then you're going to be less profitable. And so we think AI is going to be where all of this is headed in terms of enabling banks, insurance carriers, fintechs, big tech, retail, et cetera, to deliver a superior kind of consumer experience, but also make their operations work as effectively as possible. I'd go one step further and kind of to your question around really the future. Certainly, I think you could draw a corollary from autonomous vehicles to autonomous finance. We're kind of feeling our way through how much are we willing to let go of the steering wheel, right, when it comes to driving a car. And we're going to have the same questions facing us as consumers. How much are we willing to let go of the wheel when it comes to our financial lives? There are steps that are already being taken beyond just pure robo advisory for AI to try and work out what is the next best action that we should be taking. And are we willing to let the AI just refinance our loans for us? Are we willing for them to make the automated savings that are necessary to fund, our kids' college education? Mm-hmm. And, how about, decumulation after we've acquired assets and we're interested in, donating to charitable organizations, et cetera? Would we be willing to let an AI take over that? And so these questions are super exciting. There are no answers, but it's really kind of where the future, I think, is taking us is, there will be, self-driving money, to use Wealthfront's phrase, and others who are out there talking about autonomous finance. And where that actually winds up, I don't know, but there are already elements of it in our financial lives today, and there will be more to come.
I think the concept of autonomous finance is incredible. And some of that is already happening on a very, very, very small scale, right? Like you see companies routing up your spending and putting it into an investment account. More people are having just some basic sort of self-managed investment platforms, especially among young people. The adoption of that stuff is really popular. If you look at platforms like TikTok, which initially was all about dancing and entertainment from that point of view. Mm-hmm. Right now, one of the most popular concepts on TikTok is finance, and money talk is one of their biggest hashtags. People are educating themselves about financial matters, and a big part of that makes finance easier to understand is fintech companies that are providing very simple solutions for people, so that you don't have to feel like a sophisticated investor to start a basic TFSA account or an investment account in the States, right? TFSA is our sort of equivalent of a Roth IRA. So it's already starting to happen. I have to wonder and ask the same question that people would ask in a non-financial industry with autonomous cars and so on and so forth. And that is, what is the likelihood of the different robo-advisors turning against us and taking a portion of our savings and building a Ponzi scheme or something on the side, and turning on us? Is that at all a likelihood? Do you think about that stuff?
Sure. I mean, there are all sorts of questions surrounding AI, and not just in the context of financial services, but any industry. And thinking about the ethics of AI, the explainability of AI. How did an AI come to the decision, the recommendation that it did? And so there are tools and techniques that already exist. There's more innovation to come in this area. What we have seen is that those questions and those potential risks are not blockers to people adopting, investing, enabling various applications with AI. They are essentially complementary tools to, XAI, or explainable AI is a complementary tool to deep learning, so that you can have an explanation of the decision. And there are guardrails and processes that are already in place to help prevent the scenario that you've painted. But it is a question. I think it's a valid question, and it's something that as an industry, we need to collaborate and facilitate solutions around, so that this can continue to grow and evolve in the best way possible. We continue to be at the forefront of that through our own kind of investments in ethical AI, et cetera, and look forward to working with others across the industry to continue moving together. forward.
And it sounds like the purpose of it, at least within the financial industry, is to make the financial sector more inclusive for people. Because a lot of times the way that the current systems work, they result in in large populations of people being excluded from banking, from access to credit, because the financial systems aren't set up to understand these people, understand who they are, their financial implications, and then as a result, they don't want to deal with them. So fintechs are helping solve that. And it sounds like through your AI enabled applications, it's helping do that even more because we're having a wider picture of a person now.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we're so excited to work with the likes of, Upstart and others that are trying to solve these problems because, yes, AI can help enable financial inclusion, financial empowerment, financial education. And this is not just in the context of, a first world country like the United States. We want to see, and already there are fintechs that are leveraging the greater smartphone penetration that's taking place within Africa and Asia Pacific to deliver education and tools and solutions in micro lending to help farmers, invest in next year's crop. And there's AI that, is all about economic empowerment that complements kind of the financial solutions and tools such as drones and other techniques and solutions that can understand crop yields and help farmers get more out of their investment in this year's crop. So there's AI that can be applied for social good in all industries, and certainly financial services is one of them. And that's a great area and opportunity for continued investment, not just from NVIDIA, but from the ecosystem at large. And it's one that we're certainly focused on and supportive of.
I think that's a tremendous point that AI is not just something that's enabling big companies to make more money and for them to have a deeper view into us, but it also has applications on a totally separate parallel where you're trying to make a difference in the world and helping move things forward from a responsibility point of view as well.
Absolutely. It's incumbent upon all of us and, to use obviously the technology for good. And, we are already seeing that even if you think about, climate change and the heightened potential for natural disasters. Well, how can AI do a better job of predicting these potential risks? How, after they happen, can AI help insurers put support teams in the right places where they can reach the most customers and take advantage of their resources as they deploy to help people get their lives back? Even as simple moving from a natural disaster down to the example of a car accident, which is, people need cars to get to their jobs. And certainly not all of us are commuting these days, but a lot more of us are. And AI can be utilized to automate claims processing for insurance carriers. So you can look at the pictures that are being submitted through the phone. First of all, make sure that the picture isn't the same dented door or bumper you've seen before and is part of a fraud that's trying to be perpetrated. But then also use that computer vision technology that's AI enabled to say, oh, well, we've seen a dented car door from a 2015 Ford before that cost $400 to fix. Let us cut you a check today. We know what this will cost and get you back on the road. So lots of opportunities for AI to just help from a financial inclusion standpoint, financial enablement, education, and we're going to continue to invest in those areas.
Well, it makes me feel better about our prospects when I know that people like yourselves and companies like NVIDIA are keeping the things top of mind, trying to take care of us and making sure that technology is being used to help us as human beings so we can go on living our lives, go for walks outside and not have to stress about all of that stuff. Okay, so some people are on it. Sounds like you guys are on it. I guess that's my point.
Appreciate
What
that.
is I want to ask you, from your experience, what is your favorite, most impressive, most memorable way that you've seen a financial company apply artificial intelligence to improve their business? Maybe it's to improve the customer experience. Maybe it's to show incredible return on their investment over time. Something that really jumped out at you. Is there a use case like this that you can share?
I mean, the use case that comes to mind is the one that I had shared earlier in terms of Upstart. because I love the story of being able to write loans further down in the credit spectrum, right? This is something that I worked on at Credit Karma, right, where the company is very mission oriented, financial education, credit scores, credit reports. But the credit scores and credit reports aren't the whole picture of who we are as individuals and as financial stewards of our lives. Some of us don't have the opportunity to own a home and we rent. And that was my situation for the past 7 years. And, I paid my rent in a timely fashion every month. And that doesn't show up on a credit report. I also pay my utility bills on time. And there are millions, tens of millions of people that do that. And that data isn't necessarily included on a credit report and doesn't show up to help me get a better score, which would help me get a loan at a lower cost, which means I can do more with the money that I have. And that's what Upstart is all about. They're using AI to use more than just what's available on the credit score and credit report, so they can approve 27% more borrowers with that AI. And again, they're able to do that at an average 16% lower APR. And so if you think about the combination of those two things, where you're approving more people and you're doing it at a lower cost of funds to the consumer, that's a win-win all around. And I think, it's one of the more exciting stories that I've come across in terms of the role that AI can play from a financial empowerment and enablement standpoint.
That's incredible. Surely you've come across a lot of different businesses that are using it in different ways. So I agree. That's a really interesting scenario. We've talked about a lot of different topics. You've shared a tremendous amount of very valuable insights. I want to really, really thank you. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share with our audience?
I appreciate the question. And I know that you have a large startup community that listens to the podcast as well. So I would certainly encourage them to go to NVIDIA's website and check out our Inception program, which is for AI startups. That does not mean that you need to have AI in your URL or your brand name. You just have to want to invest in AI and leverage it to improve your business. And this can be across any sector, but certainly financial services applies here. And it's a free program. We have over 8,500 startups globally that have registered around the world. They get access to deep learning institute classes, access to credits in the cloud for accelerated computing access, etc. And it's a great way for younger companies to begin to invest, pilot, and understand the impact that accelerated computing in our platform can have on their business. And then, I think aside from kind of educating the audience around Inception and what it could mean potentially for them, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to kind of share what we are working towards at NVIDIA in the context of financial services. And again, it's very much, from a position of education and enablement around the variety of use cases and then the tools that are available to really help companies make the most of the opportunity that AI presents in financial services. So it's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Kevin, it's been a great pleasure. If somebody wants to learn more about these specific products and services or inquire about how they can use it for their company, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, certainly. Just go to our website, NVIDIA.com. You'll see financial services as one of the drop-down options from an industry perspective. Certainly feel free to contact me directly. I'm on LinkedIn or KLevitt@NVIDIA.com. And we'd welcome, all interactions and opportunities to talk about the future that AI can enable for their company.
I want to thank you once again for being on the Smart and Money Show. I want to wish you all the best in helping advancing the financial services industry using some amazing AI technology that you've done. So thank you for joining us and have a great rest of the day, Kevin.
Thanks a lot. You as well.